everyone, and welcome back to Fear the Final Girl, a Van Ryder Games podcast. I am your host, Jamie. I am joined by my co-host, as always, Evan. Say hello, Evan.
Hello, Evan.
It's an ongoing joke that will never get old.
I don't know. I feel like it's starting to get old. I felt the age of that joke this time.
Okay, fine. We'll change it up next time. We'll do something just totally wild. So, the theme of today's episode is Into the Unknown, and that is what we are doing. We are diving into the unknown, and we have a very special guest with us today. It's none other than Jamie Daggers, streamer, content creator, game designer, mini painter, extraordinaire. I got tongue-tied. I'm just so excited you're here. And overall, just awesome human, not to mention she has quite literally the best name in the whole wide world. And I'm not biased at all.
I was going to say, I'm a little biased. I agree. But we do outnumber you, Evan. So sorry if you have any dissenting opinions.
Sorry.
Next time, our guest needs to be named Evan, so I can win.
Okay, we'll just call the next guest Evan, whoever they may be. They'll have to deal with it.
So Jamie, is your last name? Is it like a cool chosen stage name, like Vin Diesel?
It is. It's okay. A bit of a nom de guerre. I've been asked before if it's my real last name or not, and when I usually say no, they're like, "Well, you should change it," and I'm like, "But then everyone would know my legal last name. Why would I do that?" It's like the whole point, right?
Jamie, if it's cool enough for Vin Diesel, then why can't Jamie be Daggers?
Exactly.
I want a fun last name. My name is just Jamie, like Madonna or Beyonce.
Yeah. your reputation precedes you. It's just Jamie. Exactly. Maybe you could spell it with a lowercase j or something like that. You know, like something a little bit visually distinct.
I should, I'm going to start making people call me Jamie. It's J''AMIE.
I will not be doing that.
You don't have a choice, Evan. It's my new legal name. So I'm making you do it.
That's the rules.
So Jamie, I would love for you to just introduce yourself, tell the people about yourself and what you got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to, well, maybe not in addition to, but based on what you already said, I guess I'll elaborate a little bit about each of those. I'm a full-time mini painter. It's my entire job to paint minis. I do so on Twitch from Tuesday through Friday from 1 to 6 p.m. Eastern time, where I'm usually doing all sorts of challenges, projects. Sometimes I'm painting for game companies of all stripes, including Van Ryder at one point. I got to do a couple YouTube videos for you guys, which was awesome. I do YouTube content, which is more tutorial based, but I'm going to be branching into more of like a video essay style soon. So just talking about games, not strictly focused on wargaming, although that is kind of how I got my start in this whole thing. What else? I mostly paint minis. I also draw Pokemon very poorly on my stream. That is not really relevant to the discussion, but it is part of it.
It is relevant. She does it from memory, which is hilarious.
From memory,
I could also draw Pokemon poorly if I wanted to.
I know, and that's the thing. People just keep encouraging me to do it, and I'm like, okay, if you guys want this, that's fine. Some of them are an affront to nature. I won't lie, but yeah. So in addition to that, I do YouTube. I am publishing my first game this fall. It's called Siren's Watch, so I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. There's a lot of things that I do. I do a lot of odd jobs. I just tend to be somebody who really enjoys pursuing different avenues and stuff. A big one for this year is going to be teaching at conventions. I think all told, I'll be teaching close to 40 classes over the span of the year. So at different cons, including Origins, GenCon, and then a couple other smaller cons throughout the U.S. One of my favorite things to do is I teach online through my Patreon too. We do like a monthly group class and all sorts of other things. We have a really robust Discord community. We're all just sharing different art and not even just miniatures, art of all kinds. And it's just awesome building community and getting to paint minis for essentially a living. Mm-hmm. So,
oh, we're very happy to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So, this is the portion of our show where we talk about what we've been up to. This could be books you're reading, games you're playing, video games you're playing, Pokemon you're drawing poorly, miniatures you're painting, whatever it is. So, Jamie, how am I going to do this? Which do I? Can I just call you Daggers?
That's fine.
Cool.
Yeah, sure,
right.
that's fine.
That sounds like a non-Jamie problem. You're gonna have to figure that out.
Yeah.
What about Madam Daggers?
The best part is that if Jamie or I say Jamie, we know exactly who we're addressing. You're the only one with this problem here, Evan. I'm sorry to tell you.
See. This is my problem to fix. All right. Ms. Daggers. What have you been enjoying? What have you been up to lately?
Oh, tons. Miniatures painting right now. I'm working on a project for an organization called Fabulous Marines, which is it's a nonprofit that was started about 3 years ago that raises money for the Trevor Project every Pride Month, wherein mini painters and people in the mini painting community paint minis of all kinds in different Pride colors, and then fundraise during the whole month of June by either auctioning those minis off or just in my case, running a stream while they do that, and just raising money. We're trying to make $10,000 this year for the Trevor Project. So I've been working on what essentially amounts to a really big parade float, and I'm having my community submit their own minis to add to it. So that's been a big thing, a big project I've been working on. As far as books, I'm probably going to go through my 4th or 5th read through of the Stormlight archive by Brandon Sanderson, because the new book has just been hinted at. So I'm going to need to refresh all of that. I've been really bad about going to the movies or even watching movies. I've been watching a lot of TV lately. So a lot of Delicious in Dungeon is really fun. If you guys are fans of anime, I really enjoy that one. We just finished watching Dead Boy Detectives too, which was a lot of fun. And I think that's all that comes to recent memory.
All right, Jamie. Other Jamie.
Who,
what
me?
about you? Yeah, you. That's right. You. The one in the Final Girl shirt.
That's me. Okay, so I'm part of a movie club, and every week somebody picks a different movie. And some of those movies are great, and some of them are torture. And I'm curious because I feel like, Evan, you've probably have seen this movie, but I just watched Death Proof, which is a Grindhouse movie. Yep. Jamie, have you seen that one by chance?
I haven't seen it, but I remember when it was a double feature in the movie theater.
Yes.
Planet Terror. It was the double feature with Planet Terror.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to say, wasn't a huge fan of it. I love a good horror style, thriller style movie, but the entire time I was watching it, I was like, what's going to happen? Uh-oh, everybody's dead. And then it's a couple hours later, you're like, what's going to happen? and so that was my experience with the movie. I was a little bit disappointed, but I feel like maybe I just am not movie critic enough to enjoy Death Proof. But
those movies were love letters to people who like grindhouse cinema. So if you've never really watched 70s exploitation flicks or have any kind of appreciation for any of that kind of stuff, which it's a very specific thing.
Yes.
Death Proof was Tarantino's and Planet Terror was Robert Rodriguez's, but I never found, I felt like the concept of them as a double feature was more entertaining than the movies actually were themselves.
Yeah. Oh, totally. When I read the synopsis of what the movie was about, I was like, this is cool. It's about a stuntman who's actually a serial killer. And then there's a bunch of badass girls in it who to get their revenge. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then I watched it. I was like, well, that was less awesome than I wanted it to be. So watch that. And then just wanted to quickly shout out a game called Contrabanter, which is a new game from Skybound Tabletop that is a party style kind of deduction-y game where everybody is on teams, but you're telling a story and you have 3 words that are contraband that you have to sneak into your story, and the other team has to try and guess what words are contraband. And you can put your words inside of other words. So as an example, the other team's word was script and they used the word subscription. So you can get really clever with it, and
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was super fun. I think you both would like it a lot. I really enjoyed it, and it's direct to retail, so you can get it now. I think it's available now.
So I watched Furiosa, the new Mad Max movie. which was something I was anticipating and looking forward to more than anything else for the past year. And I was disappointed.
Oh, no.
I think Fury Road is maybe the greatest action film of the last 2 decades.
I completely agree with you, actually.
Absolutely spectacular. And Furiosa is not Fury Road. It is longer, it is paced differently, it is more character driven. It's just super different. So I had the weight of expectations and was a little so I need to go see it again without those expectations, but I was a little disappointed. Womp womp.
Bummer. That's a
and
bummer.
Then I am reading Gideon Falls, which is a comic by Jeff Lemire, who did Sweet Tooth, and a ton of the guy's like so prolific. He's written tons and tons and tons of stuff, and he's an artist too.
Right.
But I've been reading Gideon Falls. It's like horror comic.
Ooh.
And it's very good.
Okay, so as the listeners may know, if you've listened before, we do have a word of the month that we feature every month for those that are just getting into the tabletop space. And this episode, the word is actually going to be a painting word that Jamie submitted because I don't know painting words. I was going to say brush. I don't know. So I was like, Jamie, do you have any suggestions? And Jamie's suggestion was zenith, and I am going to let her tell you what that is.
Yeah, I have no idea what this is.
I chose it specifically because it's a bit of a weirdo word, and I figured, into the unknown and all of that, it kind of feels a little bit mystical. Unfortunately, it's not at all. But so zenith is usually like a lighting term. It refers to the direction of where the light is hitting a model as you're painting it. So where you should put your highlights, things like that. The zenith kind of imagines the light coming from a 12 o'clock position as if it were under a noonday sun. It's probably better known under the term like zenithal is usually the form in which we use it in mini painting, because there's a very big movement to use zenithal priming, which is essentially where you paint the mini black, or you prime it black, and then you spray it from above in that same kind of pattern I mentioned before with a white, and it creates this really high contrast lighting that you can then put speed paints over top of. A lot of people call it slap chop, but the true name is zenithal priming, which also zenithal prime sounds like a really cool planet, even though it's not. So there you go.
It's Optimus Prime's older second cousin, twice removed.
True, yeah.
That is all next level, way above my skill level painting stuff, like choosing like the light direction and everything. I see other people paint stuff. I'm sure you painted stuff, Jamie, where it's like they're holding a lantern and it's like showering light just on. I'm just like, oh my god, how did?
Yep.
I'm just happy if it kind of looks reasonably decent, and I just use speed paints, so.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, the first ever minis that I painted were Marvel United, and my brother is a huge miniature painter, so he's like, well, do you want me to, he did that technique, the zenithal with everything, and I was like, this looks cool, do I even need to paint these? Because it was like, all of the X-Men figures, but they're like all black with the white like lighting. I'm like, that's cool enough, I don't think they need anything else. I did end up painting them, but I just thought it was cool.
Oh, the cool thing from there is you can do a couple of really, really easy edits that make it look really good, especially for like a board game setting where you don't necessarily care about them being painted to a really high quality or, like a high complexity level. It was actually something I talked about in my video for Final Girl, where I painted one of them in what typically is referred to as like a sun drop style. It's used in a lot of Kickstarters and stuff where they put an oil wash on the minis for you. But the method that I use takes advantage of that zenithal prime by using that lighting to kind of create almost like a filter over the mini. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with it without a whole lot of effort that, or you could just leave it black and white.
Exactly. You do what you want, I guess. Whatever
That's
makes
right.
you happy.
Yeah. It's supposed to be fun. So as long as you're having fun, then you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I have so many miniatures. It's like I know that painters often talk about their, like, I don't know, shelf of shame or whatever, like their miniatures that they haven't painted, and they're buying more miniatures to paint when they haven't painted the last batch. I mean, I'm just the guy who just buys the miniatures and hasn't painted anything. So
You sound like a mini painter, all right. That is,
I know.
That is about as that is about as common an experience as it gets in the mini painting space. So I feel you. And the best part about board games is, like, they're in a box, so you don't have to look at them all the time. They're not just sitting there judging you, you know? You're only reminded every time you bring them out, and you're like, oh, man. And as somebody whose job it is to paint minis all the time, I got to tell you, the amount of times somebody asks me, like, hey, why aren't your minis painted? You're a mini painter. I'm like, because I don't spend my time painting my own minis, of course. Like, you know, a chef at a restaurant doesn't necessarily go home and cook themselves a 5-star meal. You know what I mean?
No, it's exactly true. I spend all my time making board games.
Yeah.
I think I was at a gaming group, or I went to a gaming meetup, and they were like, did you bring any games? It was the first time I'd gone. And I'm like, no. And they're like, why don't you have, like, why didn't you bring some of your own games? I'm like, why in the world would I bring my own games?
Oh my gosh,
that would be work. I am here to relax, not work.
And I don't know if you feel the same way, but my experience with making a game so far is, like, I love it so much, but there are times where I just don't like it, you know, and I don't want to be thinking about it. The last thing I want to do is play my own game, because I'm doing that all the time, you know?
Once you're on playthrough 50, 75,
100,
right,
150,
you're like, oh God, why did I choose this life for myself?
Make it end.
So, on our podcast, we like to feature one of our own games every month. It is a Ryder Games podcast, so we have to slide some product placement in there somehow.
Sneaky.
So, this week, we will be featuring a game that is going to be coming out at GenCon. It's going to be our GenCon release. Mm-hmm. And Jamie, not the Daggers, the other Jamie...
I was still ready to respond, you know.
Yes. Tell us about our featured game of the month,
Jamie. Our featured game of the month is Gateway Island. You're like, wow, it's right next to you. Yes, it is, because Gateway Island is currently what I'm living and breathing right now.
For those of you listening to the podcast, you should know that Jamie is now holding Gateway Island up for the screen.
Wouldn't it be wild if I also had Gateway Island and I was holding it up?
You can watch this on our YouTube channel if you want to watch our beautiful faces chatting.
True.
But so Jamie is anyway. Yes. So Jamie, you are what have you called it? You are
Gauntlet Island, because so I'll tell you about Gateway Island, and then I'll tell you why it's Gauntlet Island for me. So Gateway Island is, as Evan mentioned, going to be our GenCon release. It's direct to retail. Basically, it is like the perfect introduction into board games. And what I mean by that is Gateway Island features 21 mini games, and each of those mini games is going to introduce you to different board gaming mechanics. And then what the cool thing is, after you've played it and you've experienced those mechanics, in the rulebook, it will then recommend to you another board game that you might like to try if you enjoyed those mechanics that you played. So there's 21 different games, there's a ton of different recommendations, and it really, the purpose of it is to get more people into, it's our ploy to get more people into the board gaming hobby. So if you happen to be listening to this podcast and you're just kind of curious about board games, I would say Gateway Island is one of the best places to start, because it's going to teach you everything that you need to know. It comes with a supplement book that goes over all the board gaming terminology that we throw around willy-nilly. Like, everybody knows what deck building means. Like, nobody knows what that means unless you're in the hobby. So this is going to teach you everything. Now, the reason I call it Gateway or Gauntlet Island is because I'm doing a how to play for every single one of these games, all 21 of these games. So it's 21 videos that I'm scripting and then filming and then doing B-roll for and then editing and then posting. And we're going to be posting those all leading up to GenCon so that you can, everything that you're going to need in order to dive right into the game is going to be there for you. Because as we know, people learn board games in all different ways. So you can read the rule book or you can watch me show you how to play. But we're very excited. It's adorable. It's fun. It's quick. You could play it with a few people, lots of people, and there's so much variety inside one little box. It's awesome.
That concept's awesome. I'm so, like, I'm honestly kind of surprised nobody's done it before, but that is a really cool idea.
Yeah, we've actually heard that a lot. When we went to Gamma, there was a ton of, like, you know, retail partners that were like, I can't believe nobody's done this. And even, you know, a bunch of retailers are thinking, wow, what a great tool to teach our new staff. Like, as they come in and maybe they don't know a ton about board games in the tabletop industry. So give them the gift of Gateway Island. And that's everything that they need to know, basically.
Yeah, AJ, the game is Italian. Is that right?
Yes.
It's Italian. Yeah, it comes from an Italian company. But AJ, our president at Van Ryder, had the very, very smart idea to pair each of the 21 games with a published game from another company. So after you've played the worker placement game or the auction game, then there are games that are recommended to you from other companies. And we partnered with those companies and we're putting them in the rule book. That was just a really cool way. And the retailers, the stores are super excited because they're like, we'll get this game and then we'll use it to sell other games. So sorry, that's a little bit of industry geek speak. I don't know how many people are really excited about how we're working with retailers, but
I am.
Anyway,
I mean, as consumers, I'm not going to tell people how to feel, but they should be excited about that because, you know, it ultimately it puts on display the kind of the camaraderie and the nature of cooperation that I think the board game industry really has, and that's what makes it such a welcoming and successful place, you know.
100% agree. And, like, ultimately, you know, as somebody who's been playing board games for like 10, 20 years, this is going to be super entry level for them. However, this will make, for them, they can get this as a gift for everybody in their lives. I think it's going to be the best holiday gift that somebody could get. Maybe a birthday gift. Who knows? Whatever you like. I just think that it's like a perfect little package of board games. And I live it and I breathe it. And it's awesome.
and you're living the gauntlet and you love it so much.
Yeah.
Day in, day out, 24 hours, nothing but Gateway Island.
Nothing but Gateway Island. All right.
Just blink twice if you need a ride off of Gateway Island.
My eyes are wide open. I'm never getting off this island. I love it here.
Hey, so this is the part of the podcast that we are calling the Final Girl Files. And I know the podcast is called Fear the Final Girl, but this is the portion of the podcast where we will specifically talk about Final Girl, which is a solo one-player horror survival board game that we at Van Ryder Games publish, which was in much part the inspiration for the name of the podcast. I mean, it's a big part of Jamie's story and why she's even here with the company working with us. She turned from the biggest Final Girl fan into our marketing director. It's a clear transition. And so now we're going to, in the Final Girl Files section, we're just going to talk about different Final Girl stuff about the game, stuff about ideas, stuff about development or whatever. And it's going to kind of be a grab bag of just Final Girl goodness. So today, we are going to be discussing ideas for feature films that we would like to see. Which is kind of funny because if I want to see something, I can just go make it.
You do have the power. That's true.
But these are ideas that are not in development right now. So any of the ideas we say right now, that there are no current plans for these feature films to exist. So this is all pipe dream stuff right now. But who knows? Maybe it could become a thing. So, Jamie, what is a feature film that you would like to see in the future?
Okay. I have so many to choose from because this is something that I've been thinking about for years and years. And every time I have an idea, I write it down. Many of them are very dumb, including the one that I'm probably going to talk about today. But
sometimes the dumbest ideas are the best ones. I mean,
true.
There's a reason why people like playing Birds, the Terror from Above vignette, the birds on the spaceship. Because it's like flying birds in
How'd they
space.
get there?
It's stupid as hell, but that's like a core part of the horror genre is like weird, wacky stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of times when I think about like ideas about Final Girl and stuff, I weirdly don't always think about a final girl like that I've seen. I'll think about like a scenario or whatever. So I don't know how far of a stretch this is, but I have the killer is primarily what I have mapped out for this. And the killer is just a normal man. Just your neighborhood guy. And so here's the hook. Here's the interesting things about this idea. He only ever moves one space because he doesn't want to draw attention. He's just your everyday friendly neighbor. And his focus, though, is killing as many victims as possible. So if he's in a space with multiple victims, and, you know, typically with the killer, if their hit points are 2, they still would only kill 1 victim. In this instance, if his hit points is 2 and there's 2 victims, they're both dead. Because he doesn't want there to be... Yes.
He spreads his damage around.
He doesn't want eyes on him because he's got a reputation to uphold. And this is obviously set in a small, picturesque town, a small American picturesque town like you see in the movies. And the interesting thing is that the victims all know him and trust him. So they actually like this guy, so they always move towards him. And if they panic towards him. Like if something makes them panic.
So this guy is Mr. Rogers, the serial killer.
Basically, yeah. Well, like when you think about so many like real life serial killers, who are they? A lot of them are just I never ever would have expected it from him. I didn't know he's just Jim across the street. So I just watched a movie that kind of made me think like, wow, like it was the summer of 84. Have you seen that movie? It has Rich Summers in it, and he plays a serial killer who is your friendly neighborhood police officer. And it's like these kids in the 80s, and they're just like, it's him, he's the killer, but like nobody else thinks it. So I just thought, I'm like, what an interesting idea for a killer. It's just Jim from across the street. You don't gotta worry about him. Everybody trusts him.
What would be another wrinkle you could put in is that Jim is such an upstanding member of the community and has such a good reputation that you can't actually attack him until like the evidence has built.
Yeah.
that Jim is actually a maniacal psychopath.
That's smart. That's really clever. Like to have it be like the final girl has to collect evidence like these kids did in summer of 84, where they were like, oh, well, I found this t-shirt in his shed with a blood stain, or why is he gardening all the time? What's he digging so many holes for? And like, you're just collecting all the evidence until you're like, I knew it.
Maybe when Jim kills someone, if there's other victims in that space that don't get killed, they become witnesses. Like you put a little token under them to show that they're witnesses. And then Jim very specifically starts targeting the witnesses, because if you can save a witness, you get like extra evidence points so that you can attack him. Actually, that's actually pretty fun.
Yeah, right? I don't know. I just popped into my head, and I just think like, I watch a lot of true crime stuff. So I'm like, what have I seen the most in like a real life villain? And it's just Neighborhood Jim. That's all it is.
Neighborhood Jim. That's the name of the killer. Neighborhood Jim.
Sorry to anybody that's named Jim. It's just what came into my head. So that's mine.
All right. My idea is, and I don't actually even like this movie that much, the inspiration for it, but So one of the tricky things about creating feature films is that we're always looking for ideas that provide unique hooks or mechanics.
Mhm.
There's a reason, like people would say like, oh, do one like Michael Myers or Halloween. And I'm like, Hans essentially already does that.
Yeah.
There's no more hook for like a Michael Myers-esque killer. He just walks around slowly with a knife and stabs people. Like there's nothing special about that. We've already done it, so it's difficult to like take that and turn it into something unique, or at least in terms of gameplay mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
But this one would be awesome, I think, because it would be totally different. And it would be one inspired by the movie Christine. Have you seen Christine?
I haven't.
So Christine is a Stephen King novel. And it's turned because all Stephen King novels have been turned into movies. This one was also turned into a movie. But Christine is the name of a car. And I can't remember exactly. I don't know if it's a demon-possessed car or if it's possessed by a spirit. But anyway, the car's alive and the car's evil. And this boy gets the car and like forms a bond with the car, and the car is essentially in love with him. And then the car starts murdering people on its own, like running like people who have hurt the boy, or like there's like a girl that might be interested in the boy. So Christine, the car goes and like runs her over because it's jealous of the boy.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is as goofy as it sounds. And it's been a long time since I've seen the movie. I don't think it's very good, but I think that would be a great idea for a killer, a demon-possessed car. Yeah. It can like go really fast around the board and like run people over.
I love that. That's hilarious. Like you never even think about, it's like just an inanimate object. It's like, yeah, it's just a car. Nothing to worry about. Until
just have to come up with some kind of rules for like why the car can like somehow drive around Creech Manor. Or around the spaceship or something like that, or if it's at the outpost or the Arctic outpost station. Gosh, it's basically it's 1982 backwards. It's 28191.
Yeah, I always have to do it. I always go.
I know,
okay.
But like you'd have to come up some loose thematic reason for why the car can suddenly just drive inside and drive through walls and stuff.
I mean, you could have like a flip side of the car or something where it turns into like a remote control car.
like a transformer or something.
Yeah, like it's just like an RC and it's just like me. It's got a little knife attached to it or something.
But that would lend itself to some unique mechanisms.
Yeah.
And the location would be a junkyard.
Right.
And I feel like you could like in the junkyard you could like control the wrecking ball or the trash, like the car compactor or whatever, and use it to like crush bad guys or crush the car. I think so. We haven't seen a junkyard location, so it would be a killer and a location that would both be unique, because that's something we're always hunting for. Like for example, your location you suggested, Picturesque America,
got that
essentially already done it twice.
Yeah,
so we've done it with Maple Lane and we're doing it with Falconwood, and they're on different scale. Same thing with forests. Like, we got the campground and the Storybook Woods, and it's like, let's not do another woodsy forest. There's like, what else are we gonna do with it? So that's one. But demon-possessed car and junkyard seems like that would be pretty cool.
Totally unique, and it lends into the fear of like the AI takeover and the robots. Like it's like a Tesla that comes to life. And...
Oh yeah, it could be a self-driving car that's like the AI takes over, if you want to do a twist on it like that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Well, those were some of our ideas. Join us next time and we'll talk about something else about Final Girl.
That's right. Okay, let's get into our monthly topic, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, is Into the Unknown. And if you came here expecting us to break into the song from Frozen, well, you've come to the right place. Everybody, 1, 2, 3. No, I'm just kidding. I could do it, but we won't do that. But basically, the question is, have you ever found yourself yearning to try something new, but you didn't quite know where to start. Maybe you've admired some beautifully painted miniatures or pondered the idea of trying out some modern board games, dreamt up ideas for your own board game, or wondered what it's like to create some engaging content around board games. Well, you're in the right place because that's what we all do, and that's what this conversation is going to be about. So I've got some questions for the group. We're just gonna kind of have a discussion about all of these things, but obviously we have a game designer, we have me and Jamie, both content creators, miniature painters. Actually, Jamie's designing a game as well. So we have a lot of kind of experience, and we had to start somewhere. Obviously, we weren't just born being, professionals in the space.
I came out of the womb designing games.
Yeah, you had your little detective hat on, and you're
That's
like, I'm ready. Okay, so paint us a picture, pun intended. I would love to, maybe we'll start with Jamie since you're a guest. How did you get into the tabletop hobby, and what game can you attribute to getting you hooked into board games or into even miniature painting?
That's a very good multifaceted question that I will probably spend a lot of time answering. First of all, I really love the explanation of the theme, especially since Into the Unknown is kind of a hallmark of the past 6 years of my life, coming into this industry and doing all of these wild things that I listed at the top of the show. My whole career has been unknown going forward. And I think especially, as a content creator, there's no roadmap. There's no if you're lucky, there are best practices. But even then, sometimes those are hard to parse. So, Into the Unknown is something I'm very intimately familiar with at this point. But as for how I got into the industry, or how I got into board gaming in general, my family was one of those ones that I don't know, maybe you guys hear people talk about and some people get jealous about, but we were a board game family my whole life. We've always been a gaming family. Nothing too intense, just your standard, Milton Bradley fare, stuff like that. But we always played games. We played a lot of card games growing up, and I myself would dabble into the more, trading card stuff, and then just sort of exploded Magic from there.
The Gathering.
Yeah, well, I'm slowly getting roped back into that, so I'm going to pretend for now that it's not a thing. And then, as I got to college and had a little more autonomy into what games I was playing based on what was available to me, I started my first dip into more hobbyist board gaming with, I think, as probably most people did, with Catan and games like that. I slowly went into a direction of Boss Monster. I was really attracted to the pixel art on that, and as somebody who was mostly playing video games at the time, that was an easy jump over to that. And then that kind of just broke the dam. I started to find more hobbyist board games. I made a friend who was already doing a board game podcast, and she was introducing me to conventions. And I mean, I think at this point, it probably was 6 or 7 years ago, I went to Origins for the first time, which is here in my state of Ohio. So that's the one I consider my home con. And then from there, I started going to GenCon, and then eventually, so many other cons, PAX Unplugged. And now I go to almost a con a month at this point, if not more. I guess the real gateway into the unknown of hobbyist board gaming was, if we're drilling down, is Catan. But it really started way back when my parents had what they call the Great Wall of Games in our basement. So you could just go down there, pull it off a shelf Friday night. We have pizza. We're playing something. One of my favorites growing up was this game called Weapons and Warriors, which I don't think we played the game. We just kind of we just fired little marbles at each other. And that was kind of fun.
That's one of those games. It's crossbows and catapults.
Yeah, exactly. It's very loosely a game, I think.
Yeah, very loosely a game.
We called it throwing marbles at each other.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It was just it was sanctioned violence,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Evan?
I've always played games. I have memories of wishing someone would play Axis and Allies with me as a child. I'd had the whole board set up and no one would play with me, and I would just look at the board and dream about one day having people to play with me. So I've always played board games, but I got back into them when I stumbled onto Board Game Geek. And this was quite a while ago. But the number one game on Board Game Geek at the time was Puerto Rico, which I don't even know where it's at right now. It's probably in like the 20s or 30s. And if you look at the art for Puerto Rico, it looks boring as hell. Like, it's got one of those typical Euro covers where it's like this trader in the Mediterranean, and he looks reasonably interested in these boxes that are being shipped or whatever. But it was like the number one game with like tens of thousands of, reviews, ratings. And so I was like, what the heck is this? I'm going to get this and just see. And it just went downhill from there. And then one of the games I picked up was a game called Battlestar Galactica, which was based on one of my favorite TV shows. And I'd been reading reviews and people were saying, oh, this is actually a really good game. And I got it and I was obsessed with it. But it takes like 6 hours to play. It's a wonderful experience if you're willing to give it the time. So then I decided I would design my own version of Battlestar Galactica that could be played in 60 minutes instead of 6 hours, which then ended up becoming my first published game. So that's kind of how I got into that.
You're just problem solving.
I know.
You're like, this is too much. I want less.
Yes. It was an interesting design exercise to take an existing game, at least that. And by the way, my game bears almost zero resemblance, so it's not like I ripped anything off. It bears almost no resemblance to the original Battlestar Galactica game, but the ideas that I liked in BSG, I then took and distilled down into a smaller, faster, quicker package, which was a wonderful design experience and introduction to designing board games.
Interesting. So what's that game called, Evan? You didn't say.
It is called Dark Moon.
Aha. Okay, Dark Moon. That sounds familiar because I had an email about it.
Yeah. And it is published by Stronghold Games.
Okay.
But the contract is up on it, and now I have the rights back to it.
Ooh, free agent, some might say.
I know. So maybe I make another version of Dark Moon and publish it myself.
You know what? You got the resources to do it.
I do. I do. I might even have someone to market it for me.
Me? I'm too busy with Gauntlet Island.
Right.
We can't even leave Gauntlet Island, much less go to the moon. We need to relax a little bit.
I live there now. So for me, I also came from a board gaming family very similar to the Jamie. It's just another thing that Jamies have in common. Mm-hmm. This is just a total side note, just for the listeners and Evan. Jamie and I even have our dogs have the same name. Both of our dogs are named Juno. Isn't that
wild?
Crazy? Right? So I came from a board game family. We played games constantly, like everything, Battleship, Monopoly, the classic Scrabble. Table flipping happened often because my brother and I were extremely competitive with each other. I'm positive we didn't know any rules to any games, but still would get mad when somebody lost, which that wasn't even a real thing. But then I got into modern board gaming in 2016 through a Game of Thrones, the board game, which, yes,
that's heavy,
right? So once again, my family is a board game family. My brothers are very into the hobby still, and my brother Zach was like, "Oh, I got this new game I want to show you guys," and obviously we love Game of Thrones, so we're like, "Okay, sure." And that's what started it. We then played a Game of Thrones board game all the time. Like, that was the game every weekend. Put that theme song on for 5 hours. I don't care. We listened to it on repeat, and that's what we played.
After playing that, your family still likes each other?
Well, we had to take a break from it for a little while.
Yeah, there you go.
But the funny thing is, like, actually over Christmas this year, we're like, let's pull it out again, because it'd been years since we played it, and we played it again, and I'm like, yeah, still great, still a great game. But from there, then that's kind of when the door opened. Boss Monster is definitely another one of my gateway games. We obviously played like Munchkin Quest, and we played Clank was another one that we're like, what is going on? And I have like a progression of our board game collection when we had like 10 board games and we're like, woo. And then we had to get another Calyx, and then it was another Calyx, and before you know it, we now have 1,072 board games in our collection. Jeff and I are collectors. We have a problem.
Yeah.
It's fine. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
So many of us are not board game players. We're board game collectors. And I feel that on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
This is literally your job now. It's like a write-off, Jamie.
It is. Yeah.
I write off all of these board games.
I'm
not going to lie to you. Like, this is business.
As you should.
So, yeah, it's just like, I don't know. And it just opened up this door. We didn't know what modern board games were. And really a Game of Thrones board game was just like, holy, this is like 3 hours of a good time of us fighting with each other. I'm into it. So, Jamie, I'm very curious about the first miniature that you ever painted. I want to know what was your experience. I want to know like what in your mind you were like, I'm going to pick up this miniature and I'm going to paint it. Tell me about that.
Terrific question. Actually, I always encourage anyone who is learning how to paint or anyone who will listen to me to always save your first mini, or at least save a picture of your first mini. Mm-hmm. It's always a great way to mark like how far you've come, even if it was just yesterday that you painted it. And the first mini I ever painted was actually for my partner, Rachel, who was getting into D&D at the time. Hero Forge was new, like brand new. And it was before like people had 3D printers in their home, and so you could pay them to print it and send it to you. A friend of mine had already been painting, not for too long. He'd been painting Warhammer for a while, and I was like, that looks like a lot of fun. I'm going to give it a go. I mean, it was very thoughtful. I think it looked awful compared to no. I mean, there are definitely some foundational skills there that I think are I've built upon obviously since then. But it was just kind of the motivation was to give her a nice gift. And then, like from there, it just kind of, what happened was there was a big lapse, and I go to my friend's house for New Year's every year. And one year he pulls out this Warhammer figurine. He's like, I painted this and it was beautiful. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. That was a lot of fun. I'm going to give it a go again. And I started buying minis, and next thing you know, I ended up running an FLGS like that was wargaming focused. And so I went from buying minis to buying the store, and then selling the store, and now painting minis full time. So
I love that journey. That's amazing.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
It's almost like I bought one board game. Now I have 1,000 board games. You're like, I bought one mini. I will now own the place where they get sold.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was a really fortunate situation. The person who owned it, it was more of a club. There's a pretty common thing they'll do in the UK where a lot of people who enjoy tabletop gaming or war gaming will rent out a space, just a communal space that they all share the rent of. Mm-hmm. And so he was running this club that people would use Patreon to kind of help keep the doors open for. He started getting some retail stuff in there, realized after a while he didn't want to do the retail stuff. He just wanted to be a part of a club. And so I just had to buy a little bit of his inventory and like slowly built from there. So it was a really, again, into the unknown as far as business. I'd never intended to own a business. I had been working for a mom and pop business for about 4 years at that point as an ops manager. So I was like, how hard could it be? And you know what? Admittedly, I'm glad I took the chance. I definitely learned a lot on the fly, but I also learned at the time that I didn't want to run a business. I wanted to build a community, and I realized I could do that online. So I started streaming at that point, and now we're here 3 years later, and things are going well. So
amazing. Were you like an artist beforehand? Did you paint other things, or were you just like, I'm just going to try painting, and now suddenly I'm a full-time artist?
I love this question because I hope it's as like motivating and inspiring as I think it sounds. I never did any visual art before I painted minis. Never, ever. Wow. With the exception of like obligatory classes in high school. I don't even think I took an art class in college. Yeah. Before this, I wasn't even like a doodler. I wasn't somebody who ever did like much art at all. And now I can't imagine my life without it.
That's wild. I just would have assumed that, You would have started out as a painter or something, you know, an impressionist artist or something of the sort, and then turned to minis. That's cool.
The interesting thing is I meet a lot of people who do come from different art backgrounds, and I think at this point I've painted as much as I have, and I've taught new people as much as I have, that I can almost with pretty good accuracy. I think I'm batting a pretty high average with guessing what art style they did before they started painting minis. A lot of them are photographers, and I can usually pick that out right away because they have a mastery of lighting that belies their inexperience with painting. You know, so there's little things that I know that I can, you know, pick out with somebody's first minis or something. And so having an art background, in other words, helps a lot. So into the unknown on mini painting as well, you know.
Crazy. That's amazing. And Evan, that first game that you designed, like you said you've got the experience or the idea from playing Battlestar Galactica, and you're like, I'm going to make this better. But like, what was that process actually like for you from like, I'm going to do this to, hey, I did it?
There was a contest on BGG. By the way, we talk about BGG a lot. It's boardgamegeek.com. It is the website in our industry for all things board game related. There's nothing even close to it. And it has been the gateway, the way to facilitate people entering the hobby. Like hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have discovered the world of hobby gaming through BGG. Anyway, BGG they've got all kinds of little groups on there and little cliques and things, and there was a print and play design contest. So print and play refers to games that you could just download the files from and print out yourself, and you got your own board game. You add some dice or pieces or whatever. So there's a print and play contest, and I designed this game, which was originally called BSG Express, because there was like a whole movement to like Reiner Knizia had done like Risk Express and Monopoly Express, and so someone picked up on that, and other people were like taking big games, adding dice, making them faster, and calling them Express. So I did that. I took a 6-hour game, and I turned it into a 60-minute game, added dice, and called it BSG Express. And it was, I don't know if it still holds the record for being the most downloaded game on BGG, at least from print and play files. My guess is that it's probably been surpassed by something else. But at the time, it was the most downloaded files, print and play files for a game. And I got lucky because it was actually a good game. My first design was actually decent. Now that tricked me into thinking I was much better at designing games than I actually was. And I was like, this is easy. My first game's great. I'll just design some more. And then the next 10 were absolute piles of crap. But that game was actually pretty good. And another publisher came along and said, hey, I want to pick this up. Obviously, we didn't have the Battlestar license, so I stripped all the theming out. We renamed it Dark Moon, and it was reasonably successful. So that's how that happened. Did I answer your question?
You did, yeah.
Okay, good.
No, that was totally the question. And so did the publisher just find it from Board Game Geek, or like you didn't go out to a publisher and say, hey, do you want to do this? Like, did they just find it through Board Game Geek?
The original the person who signed it originally, who did not actually, it actually was signed twice. The first publisher who signed it did discover it through its popularity on BGG and signed it. And then I did a lot of development work with it. That ended up falling through. And at that point, I had been making connections and meeting people, and I had another publisher kind of lined up, Stephen Bonacore from Stronghold, and I emailed him and said, hey man, this fell through with the other guy, would you be interested? He said I'd like to take a look, sent it to him, and that was that.
That's cool. I was just curious because it's just like, do people just like, because obviously anybody can submit a print and play or a game through Board Game Geek. So I'm not sure how
Sure.
common that is like now for a publisher to like look through that versus people actually pitching ideas. But yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know how common that is anymore.
Mhm.
At the time, I'm a graphic designer, so my print and play game looked about 100 times better than anyone else's print and play game.
Right.
Which
That
is
makes
not
sense.
like, that's not even a big brag on me.
Yeah.
It was just people putting files out there. And but mine looked really, really, really good.
Mhm.
And that, I think, got it some attention. And then I was very fortunate that the game underneath the prettiness actually was really good. So
Bada bing. Very good. So I guess for both of you, I want to know about like how the hobby ended up turning into a profession, because obviously like you're starting out, it does start as a hobby. Maybe you even design that first game thinking like, this is great. I'm just going to design games in my spare time and I'm going to continue on with my work. But how does that hobby then turn into a profession? So either of you can go because you're both doing your thing.
I think so. For me, I honestly, kind of similar to mini painting, designing a game was not really on my radar. It wasn't something like I love playing games. I never was once like at one moment just like hit with a bolt out of the blue going, I'm going to make a game. Until I started seeing a couple of friends of mine making games. And once I saw their games published and, just like watching them design them and, them kind of learning the process of building a game while they were making it and realizing that by playing games as much as I have, I've developed an understanding of mechanics from like, at least from, one side of the table. And I thought it would be really fun to try to apply those concepts from the opposite side, right? So to build the game that people are playing rather than play the game that people are building. And so I started thinking about, like other games that I've played and what sort of things I liked about it. And I mentioned earlier, I've had a long history with video games as well. And I started thinking about mechanics that I've seen in video games that I don't see on the tabletop and how those could convert, how those can translate. And if there's any specific things in video gaming that's satisfying or fun or, like draws you in that I haven't seen on the tabletop, or at least haven't seen like really built out. And I landed on kind of a solo strategy style grid-based game where there's a lot of movement mechanics. You're pushing things around and moving enemies and allies from one place to another, but also kind of like defending areas. The other part of it is as many solo games are out there, I find that most people, when I tell them it's a solo game, go, wow, I didn't know they had solo games. And Evan, you were saying earlier, like sitting around hoping somebody would play Axis and Allies with you. I find that oftentimes, if I'm not playing games with my parents, I don't play games with anybody. So I'm like, it would be really cool to have a game that I can play solo. And now I play it a lot solo. So, but it in just like Final Girl, I've had somebody point this out as well, and specifically mention Final Girl in the same breath, which is that in that same way you can kind of play it co-op too, in a way. Like it's not strictly solo in that you have to play it alone. There's ways you can enjoy it with another person, and so that part has gotten really exciting to see, because just, I guess, putting it out there and already seeing it start to evolve when it's still kind of in alpha at this point has been really, really cool to watch. And mine is currently in a print and play state just for, play testing purposes, but it's everything's moving really quickly. I came up with the idea for it, or started to put pen to paper on the way home from GenCon last year. And our current publishing plan is August. So, or at least like pre-order, I guess, will be August. So it's been a very quick turnaround. And like I said, I went from not thinking about publishing a game beginning of last year, to now imminently publishing a game. So, talking about just doing things that you don't anticipate doing and just kind of meeting it head on. It's literally been the chorus of my life for the past 5 years. So
Are you going to be publishing it yourself? Like, are you self-publishing? Are you going through a publisher? What does that look like for you?
I'm going through a small kind of indie publisher out of Waco, Texas, called Blacksite Studios. They have formally existed in the wargaming space for a while, and my game is going to be one of their first ones that they publish that is more of like a board game style. So the stuff they're used to publishing is very much like they're selling a book, and in addition to that, there's some specific minis bespoke for the game or whatever, but outside of that, it's really just kind of a book that has the game built inside of it, and it's usually a skirmish game or something like that. Whereas mine is going to be the first one that's like a contained experience sort of thing. So they're taking a bit of a chance on me, and we're gonna explore that together. So it's gonna be cool. I'm excited.
I'm excited for you. Are there minis involved in your game at all,
or
or were you
bet there are.
It could have gone one way or the other. You could have been like, no minis, or you could have been like, oh yeah, there's gonna be minis.
Oh yeah, there's minis. There's
Jamie
minis.
Daggers better be painting the minis from her own game.
Yes. Yeah, you can't open that box and have people be like, Jamie.
I have low-key thought about like suggesting that as like a crowdfunding option. The way they do it is actually kind of interesting. They have a crowdfunding thing they call the backrooms, where if it's in the backrooms, it's going to get produced no matter what. But what they do is they allow you to pre-order and give you bundles that you can pre-order that give you a little bit extra during that process that won't be available when the game is like live. So it's a cool little like answer, I think, to the kind of the Kickstarter dilemma that seems to occur a lot in the industry. And I'm excited to kind of like come up with clever ways to incentivize, like people going for some of the bigger bundles. So that was one thing I thought about.
Smart. Evan, what about you? That first design to now, you're obviously a full-time, like you work for a publisher, obviously, but you're still designing games. So what was that journey for you?
My former life was I did marketing for film and television. I was a marketer, and I was very, very, very good at it. And I also really, really didn't like it. So if anyone listening to this wants a piece of life advice, getting really good at something you don't like is bad. It's a really, really bad.
Yes. I agree.
Because you will be good at it, and you will get paid more and more and more, and people will be like, oh my gosh, you're so good at this, and you will be miserable. Because I like creating, and so I wanted to be the one creating things. And I got into game design. I more stumbled into game design, as I described, similar to how Jamie Daggers has been talking about it. But when it came to actually making it my full-time job, that was very intentional and required a lot of very focused work. I didn't just fall into magically getting paid to like make board games. I had to actually make that happen. And a lot of part of it was meeting AJ, my partner and president of Ryder Games. And I'd watched other designers try to make it in the industry and try to make a living. I've got a family, I've got kids, so it wasn't like I could just go off, and I had people to provide for. And I watched these other designers show up at conventions with like suitcases of 20 different designs that they would just shop around to the different publishers. And I would show up with one design that I had like poured my heart and soul into, and it was my baby and all this. And I realized that the way they're doing it is how you make it, as how you can actually make a living as a designer. You put about 20, 30 irons in the fire, and hopefully a few of them hit, and hopefully some publishers pick up, and you don't know what's going to work and what's going to not work. But I didn't make games that way. I made games more like a publisher. So when I met AJ, I was actually getting advice from him because he had his own company already. I was like, hey, I would like to maybe start my own company. And he was just like, well, what if you just came and worked with me instead? And so we tried that out for 6 months, and we worked together really well, and we liked the same kind of games. One of my designs, Detective City of Angels, I showed to AJ, and he just fell in love with it and thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so then he and I spent 3 years working 2 full-time jobs as we tried to make Van Ryder a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually we were able to. So it was it was a lot of work, and it was very intentional. I didn't just like trip and stumble and it's like, oh, I've got a board game job. Woo! It didn't work quite that way for me. So
right.
I have a quick question. Did you find that once you started developing games, you couldn't stop like thinking about like more games? Because that's what I'm finding.
Like games to make?
Yeah, like I found that like again, going from like really know if I need to do that to being like, yeah, why not? I'll take a crack at it. And now being like, okay, I've got like 8 or 9 games that I'm thinking of at any given time.
Oh yeah, my brain's been packed with like 40 active ideas for the last decade.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100%. That's a good sign. That says that you like this, and that you're good at this, and that you want to do more of this.
I do enjoy it, and I'm fortunate to be around a lot of people who are also in the game industry. I actually literally just got back like early this morning, late last night, like midnight, from a trip to Chicago with some industry friends where we just went away for a weekend to play games because we don't get to do that at cons. So.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, it's been wild going from like no intention of doing that to now it's like something I'm considering as like an ongoing thing, not just this one and done.
Yeah, no, I'm constantly milling ideas in my head. I have probably 5 incredibly good, viable designs and products in my head at any given time, and then like 30 other ones that maybe could be good.
A smorgasbord of ideas.
Unfortunately, I just don't have time, and a lot of the games that I design are incredibly ambitious and way too big. And then I start making one and get stuck making it for like 4 years. And all the other ideas have to just sit and wait.
The solution is, Evan, you just need to make an express version of those
There you go.
games.
That's
right.
Boom, done.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
I want to know about, I know this has definitely been a big thing for you, Jamie, and I'm curious for you, Evan, about like how big of a role does or has community played into kind of your growth in the space, like the development and getting into the hobby, getting into game design, mini painting. What does that look like for you in terms of community?
Community for me is the only reason I'm here, to be completely honest with you. Not only just like monetarily, but encourage, in terms of encouragement, motivation, momentum. I guess the concept of like designer as celebrity is only sort of a recent thing. And I say celebrity very loosely, of course. Like not everybody's walking around knowing who created their games, but people who kind of do inside baseball a lot, go to all the cons, that sort of thing. They start to follow designers, right? And there are some who've reached a really high profile level where they are known for X game or something like that. And I don't know if it's just a measure of how popular that game was or how consistent they are as a designer, but it's kind of hard to separate the concept of community from design specifically. And then when we talk about my mini painting side of what I do, even less so is it kind of like it's inextricable, right? It's I wouldn't be putting as much time, I mean, upwards of 24 hours a week into live streaming if there weren't people there to watch it. So a lot of that is just continuing something that I'm successful at and that I enjoy, and allowing that. I always refer to like the different projects that I take on as like different plots and watering all of it and seeing what grows. And so far right now, painting and game design have been, budding slowly and something that I've been really enjoying and, doing my best to turn it into something that looks like a full-time career, and just being stubborn enough to not do any other work until it looks like that, has been part of that. And the only reason I can do that is because of my community. And luckily we have a great one, and the mini painting community is just as good, which is great to say, because I know that our two communities, I say our two, like I'm not part of both, but the board gaming and the wargaming, I use that as an umbrella term because that includes a lot of mini painters. Since that arm of the hobby tends to be very, very painting focused, because it's a huge part of that whole process of play on that side. Whereas on board gaming, you don't ever need to pick up a brush, and you won't be the worse for it. You can still play the game start to finish without painted minis. The small mountain that I've been trying to move over the past few years is to bring those communities closer together, because there are a lot of things that they share in common. I think there's a lot of ideas that can be cross-pollinated and shared in both arenas that I think, again, creating an even bigger community out of those two could really benefit from. So it's at the end of the day, I do paint minis, I do design games, I do YouTube, I do content creation, but like ultimately the core of it, and kind of what I mentioned earlier when I sold off my business, was to build community. That's what I've always been focused on. It's something that I'm really passionate about. And it was something I was doing at the store before I ever turned my camera on for the first time to go live. So it's a huge part of what I do.
Yeah. I feel like community is the one thing that I believe, like, above all, it's the most important thing in all aspects of like the gaming world, whether it's wargaming, painting, board games, even designing games. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I've been working on some of my own designs, and I've just been like quietly in some of those groups of like the board game design lab and stuff like that. And just like seeing how supportive people are in those communities, it honestly blows me away. And it's the same thing with like Foster the People, like community first always. And like just watching people, and in your Discord, Jamie, and in the Ryder Games Discord, like there are people that are building connections like that are incredibly meaningful, and they've never met face to face, but they just share a passion for this hobby, which I think is just like, there's nothing quite like it. Like walking through a convention, I'm sure you both have had this experience, but every convention I go to, I will just stand there and I'll look around and I'll be like, there's just thousands and thousands of people here.
It's a
playing
cool feeling.
board games and loving. It's the best feeling ever. Like if you go to a convention, anybody out there, I recommend just taking a moment to stop and look around and be like, I love all these nerds. Like, this is amazing. This is the best thing ever.
It's a cool realization too, to look around at all those people and just the sheer diversity, the sheer like the difference of all those people, and then realizing that the big old common denominator between all of us is we like games, you know. And
totally.
Like if we sit down at a table with somebody, we could disagree on everything else, but we know we like games, you know, and that's like that's always a starting point, you know. Because there's all sorts of different ways that we are encouraged to be divisive, this, you know, like these days. And like, I think starting from a point of commonality is it's obviously the first step, right? So you've done that by walking in the door, you know. And in terms of like, you touched on online community, my best friend, like one of the best friends I've ever made in my entire life, I've only known for like a year and a half, and we've only met in person 3 times, but we talk every single day. And it's like, streaming mini painting led me to meet her and like, you know, like engage with so many people who are incredibly important to me now that I maybe see once a year, you know. It's wild. It is truly everything.
Yeah, I am the same way. Like my main goal when I started out in the content creation space of board gaming, like when we started Foster the Meeple, Jeff was like, what's your main goal? I was like, make friends. And he's like, okay. He's like, anything else? I was like, nope, make friends. And I just feel like I'm like, man, I'm great at my goals because I have sure achieved it. Because basically, like all of my best friends I have made through this hobby. And like, I literally fly down to Kentucky every year to hang out. People are like, why are you going to Kentucky? I was like, that's where the board games are happening, man. Like, it's where we're having good times in Kentucky. Didn't you know? But like, yeah, I just think it's wild. And I've even found that through, and Evan, you've probably seen, like, the Van Ryder Games community is like a very strong community. And I know a lot of that has been brought on by Final Girl, because it's one of those games that people are just like, they like live and breathe Final Girl. And it just has, it breeds this like incredibly passionate community of people who are like supporting each other, like, you're going to play this scenario. Well, you should try this. And they're like in the Discord constantly, like as they're playing. And I think that's cool. Evan, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on the community piece.
Oh, I mean, community is how I got into this. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be invited to a convention called the Gathering of Friends.
Mm-hmm.
And this was very early in my design journey process. And the Gathering of Friends it's kind of exclusive. It's an invite-only convention, but it is stocked with every major board game industry person.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went there, I got to meet all of them in a very intimate and casual setting, and that networking opportunity is basically what allowed me to build my career.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely community, and the networking and how wonderful and inviting the board game community is absolutely a part of why I'm in this at all.
Yeah. I feel like that is felt like if anybody is looking to get into this hobby or this space as a profession and you don't care about people or community, I just don't know how successful you're going to be.
Right. I agree.
Because it is
agree.
It's so strong. Like, I don't know. I glance over to my Discord and I'm in literally like, I don't know, maybe 50 different Discord channels of like different like publishers and gaming groups and content creators. And I can't keep up with it all, but I just want to be there. I'm just like, I'm here in the background.
I would go so far as to say, I don't know, maybe this is a hot take, but like you can't be successful in this industry without having at least a small spirit for community. You know, I think there's so much to be gained from cooperation, collaboration. I find that, like we were talking about design earlier, the reason I haven't gotten started on anything else yet is because I want to start doing collaborative design. You know, I want to work on things with other people because that's truly where my heart is like building something with someone else and like using those ideas together to bolster one another. Even the game I'm building now there's a community spirit at its core with the design of the board it's all modular tiles. And so I wanted that to be part of the design. And I've been really kind of like hardline about that because I want, you know, ideally there will be a community that builds around the game and shares different map configurations and lets people kind of like explore the world. I've just created the sandbox and now we all get to play in it together, you know? And so the part of the game wouldn't exist without that community. So like all of the things I do are really intentional to help build or at least prosper with the existing community.
Totally. What I think is really interesting about that, because you're making a solo game and obviously Final Girl is a solo game and people would think, oh, solo game, like all by yourself. And it's like, nah. Like the community around the solo games I find are really, really strong. Like
they're very vibrant.
I think to your point, Jamie, when you were saying, you know, you wanted to start content creation to make friends, I think there's a spirit of that within the decision to make that modular system, because I thought to myself that like if you're playing a solo game, it's not because you're a loser who can't find friends. It's usually because you don't have the resources to connect with a local community, or there just isn't one where you are, or you haven't found one yet. But reality is, if you're playing a solo game and you're enjoying it and you have an opportunity to build community online, which is what we've been talking about a lot the past few minutes, you now can technically play a solo game with other people, just not at the same time necessarily. We're still playing together, you know, we're still exploring a world together. So it's like you're playing apart, but together, if that makes sense.
100%. Hundo. That's my final girl. I'm playing alone, but I'm playing together. Especially when you stream it and everybody's like, don't forget the golf cart. Why did you do that? Why? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, man. It's fine. So I guess I'd like to, move on to some of our other stuff. But before we do that, I would love to ask if you have one piece of advice to somebody, what would you give to our listeners who are looking to start in a new hobby, find their niche, find their community, find their people? What is the one piece of advice that you would give?
For me, I would say the biggest piece of advice I can give is have the courage to suck. Like, have the courage to be bad at something, because even if you are never not bad at it, I think doing something confidently, regardless of, your objective skill, is more important than just being good at something. There are plenty of people who are really, really good at things that are just, kind of are aware of that and not approachable, and it makes it less fun or less enjoyable to back that. And so I think having the courage to suck at something, again, is a great starter's mindset. And it's also something long-term to consider too, as you try to branch out into other techniques or other approaches or other mediums or something like that. I think it's it's kind of a lifelong goal, is to really honestly always suck at something for me. And, because your value isn't what you provide. The thing that you provide that's important is your uniqueness. Like, the person you are is what you bring to the table, not necessarily the productivity that you kind of expel. And so by that measure, if you don't show up as your true authentic self, then that's really only the only losing scenario in this case. So suck at something and be okay with it.
That's my favorite piece of advice. And I just actually made a video by the time this comes out, it'll probably be out by now, but about starting a board game YouTube channel. And one of my main piece of advice is just be your authentic self, because we already have a Rodney, we have a Rado, we have a Jamie Daggers. We don't need people to try and be who they're not. We want people to be them, and it's the best way for people to connect with you. So I think that's great advice, Jamie. From one Jamie to another Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
Excellent advice. You're welcome. Evan, what about you?
I mean, my advice would be whatever idea you have in your head, whether it's you're thinking about writing a book, whether it's you're thinking about composing a song, whether it's you're thinking about painting a mini, or whether you're thinking about designing a game, do it as fast as you can. Don't let it sit up in your brain thinking. I've talked to, specifically in regards to game design, I've talked to lots of people who constantly talk to me about their ideas in their head and oh, this is my idea or whatever. And I'm just just make the thing. Just make it. You have to make it. Just it doesn't have to be good. Just make something. Make your physical thing. Make your song. Paint your mini. Whatever it is, just do it. And don't let it sit up in your head. Don't float around in your head wondering oh, if I could do this or whatever. Just do it. You're gonna suck at it. Per what Jamie's advice was, you are going to suck at it. You've never done this before, and you're gonna suck at it at first, and that's okay. The point is you're trying to figure out if you like it, not if you
right.
And if you like it, keep doing it, but just make the thing. Sit down, make the game, make the song, paint the mini, write the first chapter of your novel, write a poem, whatever it is. Just do it. Whatever obstacle in your brain is saying, oh, I don't, ignore that and just create.
Yeah, that's such a good piece of advice, because I know there are idea people who will think of a million things and then they'll just never do it. But it's it's never gonna happen unless you actually just try and then fail fast.
I have fail fast is also really good advice. I won't lie.
Yeah.
I have a little saying that I always sign off my streams with. I say make marks, and that literally encompasses kind of everything that we just said between the three of us, which is this idea I got from a book about, like art and starting out and being confident in your creativity. The idea that like when we were young and we weren't necessarily creating anything, we were just making marks on a page or something like that, or whatever it is, and we weren't self-conscious about that, but we were still creating something. And, like once you start to learn the quote unquote proper way to do things, you start becoming self-conscious of those marks that you're making, and it might just prevent you from doing anything. Mm-hmm. And so the goal is to get back to that mindset of creating without the ego tied to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge part of doing anything, is exactly what Evan said. Like, just do something, do anything, create.
Just make.
Just do it. Nike. Not a sponsor. Okay, so moving into our next segment, we, Jamie, in all of our episodes, we have a prompting question for our audience so they can submit some fun things. For the prompt for this episode, we asked our audience if you could invent your own quirky or unconventional hobby, what would it be? Now, I gave some great examples, like cloud watching competitions or synchronized underwater dancing, which Evan pointed out that synchronized water dancing was a thing.
Yes, it is.
My bad. However...
It's an Olympic sport, Jamie.
I only watch the Winter Olympics. I'm a Canadian. Okay, nobody's swimming up here. So... somebody in the Discord, though, came back and said, you forgot to tell Evan you can't come up for air until the dance is over. So that's why it's unique. So I just wanted to read out some of the fun hobbies that our Discord has suggested that people try. The first one is just an egg on my face. It's a mushroom eating contest hobby because I hate mushrooms and the entire Discord is mushrooming against me, and that's fine. It's fine. Someone said a William Dafoe Appreciation Society. That's a hobby they'd like to get into.
I feel like that exists.
It probably does.
It has to.
It has to. A book club for the random ass assortment of books I read. No book of the month. 1 month, it'll be Stephen King. The next, Steinbeck's East of Eden. The next, Hitchhiker's Guide of the Galaxy, and so on and so forth until everyone quits book club but me. So...
Solo book club.
Yeah, that's Peak Cthulhu. They're just trying to outlast everyone in the book club. Someone said painting landscapes using neon black paint, capitalizing every word in a sentence unnecessarily. And somebody actually found this weird hobby that apparently is a thing where somebody goes out and they get children's coloring books. They found like a Frozen coloring book and they turn all the characters into horrifying versions. It's Olaf with like razor sharp teeth and blood dripping down and bloodshot eyes. I was like, now that's a hobby.
It's like those people that paint like Star Wars AT-ATs into Thomas Kincaid paintings that they picked up at the thrift store.
Yeah,
Exactly. The last one that I think somebody just put in, I was going to write silly putty sculptures, but apparently that's a real thing. And then they graced us with the images of what silly putty sculptures are. And if you're listening to this, just be happy that you can't see what I'm seeing because they're terrifying. So those are some of the weird hobbies that our Discord members would like to invent or try.
This might be my favorite part of the show. This needs to just be a standard part of the show, trivia or the game show. We should call it's our game show part of the show. And we need to record a special theme song for it. So maybe Jamie, maybe we'll have it this time. Maybe we talk to our composer and we get like a special stinger, which you're going to maybe hear right now, introducing our game show. This week's game show is super awesome miniature trivia. So, Jamie Daggers, you are on blast. You better be really good at this.
I feel like I have a bit of an edge.
You might have a bit of an edge. It's so
edge.
So it's Jamie versus Jamie.
The ultimate showdown, where one Jamie knows everything and the other one knows nothing.
So this is totally researched on the internet, and none of this might be true. So
hey, that's good enough for a lot of people.
I did my best to fact check this. I'm sure I would be interested to know if any of this is wrong. I'm sure our fans and listeners and Discord supporters will tell me if any of this is wrong. But for now, what I have learned is law.
Perfect.
All right. Question number 1. What is the first tabletop game, published that had miniatures? And when was it published?
I have a good guess about the game, but I don't know when it was published.
I have a guess.
Okay.
It's based on nothing.
I have to admit, mine's mostly based on vibes also.
We're gonna go for Jamie VRG Jamie to go first.
I am going to say War of the Ring, and it's only because it's sitting behind me, and I know it's kind of old, but not that old.
Kind of old? How old is that?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. When was Mordor invented? That year.
2000. Is that like 2002, 2003 when that was published?
Maybe.
Good guess. You know what? I'm not going to shame you anymore. Good guess, Jamie.
Thank
All right,
you.
Miss Daggers.
I am going to say Monopoly.
So those were pieces. I'm thinking miniatures in a way where they were actually part of the gameplay.
I have a long-standing, very, very cursed take that Monopoly is technically a miniatures game, and I've always wanted to paint it just to prove it. No, I get it.
That is no. That makes sense. They were pawns. I'm thinking like where the pieces mattered, because if you play the car or the top hat, it has a zero bearing.
True. Okay.
So from what I could learn, the first one was a game called Conflict, published in 1940 by Parker Brothers.
I've heard of that game.
It was republished in the 60s, and I think maybe republished in the 70s, so it's been around for a while. I think it got supplanted by Risk, but it had 48 miniatures, of which were like little tanks and planes and things.
And we're sure it wasn't War of the Ring, made in 2000.
Pretty
and
sure
whatever.
War of the Ring didn't exist in 1940.
We're going to have to ask the fact checkers on that one.
Yeah, fact check.
All right, so although Monopoly was a good choice, but if you're going for miniatures on that point, you can go way earlier.
Oh,
like you
totally.
can go back into the 1800s of games that had
Chess.
like, pawns and pieces. Yeah.
Technically, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and say 0 for 0. It's still a tie. It's anyone's game. All right. Question number 2: how many unique models have been created for Warhammer 40K?
Oh man.
I definitely know this.
Do you?
No.
I found one very anecdotal piece of evidence that gave a number, and I don't know if it's right, but I'm curious to see what.
That's a big number. That's a big number.
Ms. Daggers, why don't you go first?
I'm literally gonna take like a library guessing how many jelly beans in the jar kind of guess here and say like we'll ballpark it at 2,400.
Okay.
My guess is
Yes.
40K.
40,000.
Are we doing
Yes.
Prices Right rules? We have to close this without going over.
I hope not.
So Games Workshop and Warhammer 40K have existed for 44 years.
Wow.
That is literally how old I am.
Oh.
It's existed as long. And the very, very anecdotal piece of evidence I found said there were 80,000 unique sculpts.
I was more right.
You were.
And that was a conservative estimate.
That is wild. 80,000. Do you think somebody in the world owns all of them?
No, I do
Okay.
not.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess no.
I
That'd be
think that
kinda
that
cool.
might be like orcs. Like you've got a ton of orcs, and like there's like they're all the same, but there's like 10 or 20 versions of them. So
That's true.
It's kind of how I mental mathed it. I was like, each new release has like new sculpts. So, if you figure there's like, I don't know, 15 to 20 bespoke model sculpts in each army and whatever. But 80,000 is way more than I expected.
I mean, over 44 years, it kind
True.
It makes sense. All right, so we're gonna give 1 point to Jamie VRG.
Yay! Price is Right rules.
I think that's a good
All right.
move, yeah.
Next question. What is the heaviest miniature that currently exists in tabletop gaming? Jamie Daggers, I'll let you. No, Jamie VRG, you got to go first.
Okay, I have a guess. I don't know what his name is, but in Marvel United, there was like Galactus. Is that what it's called? The big one.
It's not Marvel United.
Oh, Marvel something.
Marvel Zombicide.
That was exactly what I said. So, whatever his name is it Galactus? Did I say that right?
It is Galactus, correct.
Nailed it.
All right, Jamie Daggers.
I was originally gonna say I was gonna guess a big board game model like the Cthulhu from Death May Die, but I think the crown still probably exists in the wargaming space. I'm gonna guess it's a big resin like gunship for 40K called the Thunderhawk.
Nope.
I think it's
one bigger than the Thunderhawk.
Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong name, but I can picture it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I know a couple of YouTubers recently did a build of one and painted it up. Shoot, I forget the name of it.
Thunder Eagle.
That is currently, it's called the Mantis.
Okay.
And it is custom. They don't even make them until you order them.
Yeah.
And it costs over $2,000.
I think they even come in like a wooden box, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It costs $2,000 to order the Mantis, and it weighs 35 pounds.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do not know if this model is actually playable. I think it's just a collector's item, from what I could tell. It's just a collector's item. So I actually wasn't considering that. However, the heaviest model in tabletop gaming is Galactus from Marvel Zombicide. You are correct, Jamie.
Oh my god!
However, because Jamie Daggers knew about the Mantis, which really is the heaviest thing, I'm going to give you both a point.
I just thought it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen, and that was the Galactus figure.
Bonus point. Can you guess how much it actually weighs, the Galactus?
The Galactus. I haven't even seen it in person, so I don't have... I would be taking a shot in the dark.
Go ahead and guess. It's bonus point. Half point.
I'm really bad
22
at knowing.
pounds.
22 pounds. I want to say 13 pounds.
It is 18 pounds. And somehow you both managed to be equally distant from that. So now we're tied.
Yay!
1 point to Jamie and 1 point to other Jamie. And I'll let you to figure out which Jamie I was talking about when I said that. All right, next question. Which game, the base game only, comes with the most miniatures? Not Kickstarter extra. It's just the base game.
Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the one that I was thinking of. It's in my basement right now, and I can't even think of what it's called.
I have a guess, but I just don't know.
Who wants to go first? Jamie VRG, you can go first. What's your guess?
My guess is going to be wrong, but it is, I'm guessing Mechs versus Minions.
Okay, good guess.
It has a lot.
It does. Jamie Daggers?
Because I'm completely blanking on this other game, I'm just going to guess Zombicide.
Original, second edition? Black Plague.
We'll go with Black Plague.
Okay. Nope.
Oh.
So Mechs
Fair.
versus Minions and Zombicide, they have like in the region of 50, 60, 70 miniatures in the base
Right.
game. Axis and Allies, 1940 Europe edition, comes with 610 miniatures in the box.
Absurd. Feels
Now, to be
unnecessary.
fair, these are not original sculpts. They're just like a bunch of tanks and stuff. But
Sure.
from what I could find, that is the one that has the most in the box. 610
crazy.
miniatures.
Hey, credit where credit's due, you know?
Totally.
Now, if you start to include expansions like Kickstarter stuff, you could get into some crazy numbers. In fact, Joan of Arc, Kind of Destiny, Legend of Destiny, I can't remember
I
what
think
it's
there's
called.
something like 900 in that one.
The all-in pledge had 930 miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with it? I feel
I
like
don't
that's so
You get
daunting.
to painting.
Yeah.
You get to Peyton. That's right. That's the answer. You get to Peyton.
You get to painting.
All right. It's tied 1-1. Final question. How many miniatures currently, once Series 3 comes out, exist for Final Girl?
Whoa, I need a minute because I might actually be able to do this. Hold on,
Nope. You got 15 seconds, girl.
No.
Nope, 15 seconds. Timer on.
I'm not
now.
gonna
Setting the
turn
timer.
around. I'm not gonna turn around and look at the box on my shelf because it's behind me still. You said before 3rd edition comes out?
No, when 3rd edition comes
When
out.
3rd
Currently,
edition
I have a
comes out.
question. Is this
Okay.
including all of the vignettes and
It includes everything. Number
Thank
of
you.
miniatures that if you have everything, once Series 3 comes out, if you own all the Final Girl things, how many miniatures will you own? Jamie, VRG, you get to go first. In
Okay.
5,
No,
4, 2, 1,
hate
go.
this. Ah! Okay, I'm gonna say. I want to say like 80.
Okay.
I was gonna ballpark, and based on the I only have the 1st edition box or the first round of minis. I'm going to guess based on that, extrapolating 67.
Okay.
Are you counting each individual bird and zombie?
Yeah, I said
Okay.
individual minis.
I was just checking. Are you counting
We
alt
c-
minis?
We can. I said if you
Okay,
owned all
I
the
was just
things
checking.
we made.
I was
Yes,
just
it
checking.
includes alt minis.
Got
What
it.
did you say? 80?
Yeah.
The number is 164.
That's what I was. As soon as I said 80, I was like, I forgot about all them alt minis. And there's just so many birds and zombies. It's
You were-
ridiculous.
Jamie, VRG, you were so far off that I don't even know if I can give you a point for that. Even
It's
though you were
just-
technically closer than Miss Daggers. All right.
Yeah, but if you doubled mine, I was really close.
Right. If I doubled yours. Okay. So how many unique sculpts exist? This is
Okay.
bonus. All right. For the win.
I'm gonna
164 is the number of
double
total
down.
Minis. Jamie's like literally, for those who are listening, she's like moving her fingers around as if she's tabulating on a calculator or maybe an abacus.
I feel like, oh my gosh, because there's all of the additional, like, I mean, there's a Jamie mini. That's got to be counted in there. So
Uh-huh.
I want to say 72.
72 unique sculpts. Miss Daggers, what is your guess?
I'm doubling down. I'm gonna say 67 again.
67
I'm
again.
smart.
Ah. Ladies, 112 unique sculpts.
Oh. But all the birds are different, are they?
No, there's just 2 birds.
2 birds.
These are all
Two
I
zombies.
have as an art director. I have commissioned
Oh, don't I know it.
112 unique sculpts. So
That
far.
is wild. I was just trying to think. I'm like, okay, so each set has 2 girls and 1 killer, but some of the killers have minions. And then you
Yeah.
have the vignettes, and then you have all of the alt minis, and then you have all of the extra girls, and then you have the promo girls.
And you have the vehicles.
The vehicles!
Oh,
Evan!
you forgot the vehicles.
This golf cart is going to
Jamie!
haunt me for the rest
Oh.
of my life.
Classic blunder.
Oh,
No one
dang.
gets extra points. It's a tie. The Jamie versus Jamie miniatures challenge is ends in a tie.
It was always gonna end this
Yay!
way.
You're
it
both.
was
You know what? You're
meant
both
to
winners.
be.
That's
You're
right.
both
We know
winners.
it. We totally already knew that.
Also, people listening, feel free to fact check all of my all of my questions and facts. Some of them might be horribly wrong. I would love to hear if that's the case.
Yeah, especially if you fact check them on the final girl minis, because that would be really funny if you were wrong on that one.
But they don't know all the stuff that's coming out for Series 3, so there's no way they could actually know.
That's true. Sneaky, sneaky. So that is everything that we have for this month's episode. I found this to be a really fantastic conversation. I think a lot of people are going to appreciate both of your insights and some of the things that I might have said too. Who knows? But I wanted to obviously thank our special guest, Jamie Daggers, for joining us. And Jamie, where can our listeners find you?
So you can find me Tuesday through Friday, 1 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time over on my Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/Jamie Daggers, or daggers.tv will also guide you there. I'm always posting on Instagram pretty much constantly. You can find me just about anywhere online with the name Jamie Daggers. It's like the only thing you see when you search that too, which is pretty cool. My SEO, super on point. You can find my YouTube channel via searching Jamie Daggers as well. You can find some really cool VRG themed videos on there too, if you so please. And find me at cons. I'm always walking around there. You know, if you ever want to learn from me directly, I teach at cons. I teach on my Patreon. You pretty much just search my name.
Amazing. And I'm going to make sure to put all of the links and everything that people need in the description of the show notes. So definitely check all of that out. So we hope that you enjoyed this episode of Fear the Final Girl, the Ryder Games Podcast. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the podcast, following it, doing all of that fun stuff, and do it. Do it because it's fun. Do it because you love it. So the closing remarks in our next episode. Evan, what have we got going on next month?
So our next episode, the theme of our next episode will all be about past lives.
Ooh.
Who were you in a former life? Does reincarnation exist? If you were someone in a former life, who would you be? In fact, that's the question we have to ask our lovely listeners. If you had to take a guess at what or who you could have been in a past life, what or who would you be? Tell us your story. Maybe you were a cockroach. Maybe you were Salvador Dali or Gandhi or something worse.
Or something
anyway,
worse.
Tell us what you would have been in a former life. Extrapolate. Elucidate. Tell us. Anyway, that's our theme for our next podcast.
Yes, and you can submit all of those through our Discord, the Van Ryder Games Discord, or by sending me an email at marketing@vanrydergames.com. You can always write your responses, or even more fun, you could do a little video or a voice recording, and we will make sure to add that in.
Love videos and voice recordings. And if
this is true.
We've had them on previous episodes, and they are fantastic. So
good.
If you really want to be involved, just record yourself talking about your past life and be marginally clever about it, and maybe we'll include you.
Who knows? That's the fun game. Will they, won't they? So thank you, everyone, for listening. We will be happy to catch you again next month. And thanks for stopping by. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
See ya.